Guys, welcome to part 3 of our verb, and this is known as a mood. If you're wondering, do verbs really have mood? Well, I mean, they can feel good or bad, but by mood we mean pretty much what sort of condition the verb is in. For example, you can have a verb that expresses a truth, you can have a verb that expresses potential, we can have a verb that actually commands you to do something. So we have 3 categories for a mood of a verb, okay? And that is, the first one that we know is the indicative mood. And the indicative simply equals truth, statement. So as an example, I'm going to use I am reading a book. So for example, we've used that in the previous lessons, and today we're going to show you how this feels, and literally that's why we call it a mood, how it feels to the reader. When I say I am reading, it's a statement of fact. And I mean, if I'm reading a book and I say to you that I am reading, you can tell it is indicative, okay? So it indicates that something is happening, hence the word indicative. The next one, I'm just going to copy and paste that. The next one is called a subjunctive. And this is what we would call a supposition, or by a supposition, I mean potential. Potential, not true, but could be true, okay? So in other words, instead of saying I am reading, I can say something like, I should be reading, okay? So I should be reading is a mood that says, well, I'm not reading, but I should be reading, okay? Also, I can express things like a wish, okay? So if there's a potential, you can express a wish using a subjunctive. So if only I should read, okay? Or that I read, or that I be reading. What you recognize with the subjunctive technically is this: shoulds, and there's another should right there, so there's the auxiliaries, and we'll talk about a little bit more detail as we get some more examples going for you. And then be with a kind of like an adverb here, that, okay, that I be, or that I be reading. Okay, so these are subjunctives. They're not true, they have the potential to be true, and also they express conditions. Conditions such as, if I am good, if I should be good today, I would read. Okay, and there's your should, and there's a would right there as well. Okay, the last part, or the last mood, is known as an imperative, from the Latin word impero, which is to command. And we have commands. In English, really, commands are expressed very, very simple. The subject, as we've seen in other examples, is not really expressed because a command is directed to somebody. And if it's directed to somebody, it should be clear who the subject of that command is. Therefore, English does not really express it, okay? You could, for example, put it in for a fact if you like, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But essentially, commands are just a verb punctuated by an exclamation mark. So if I want to say read, there it is, read. Right? You can also say, and here's where I can make a subject, right? Read, you, okay? this will be a little bit more rude, right? So when you're adding that subject in there, you are kind of being a little bit mean, right? You could say you, right? But then you need another exclamation mark, read, which is equally rude. Now notice I cannot use a command and say I read or he reads. Okay, if I wanted to say something like that, I would go into the subjunctive, let him read. Okay, the subjunctive is kind of a way in English to really put together different situations, okay, that aren't true but have the potential to be true. So when I say let him read, I'm not saying that he's either reading right now or that you're not letting him read. There's a potential for him to read, therefore it's a subjunctive. All right, so I think the indicative in terms of a truth statement is pretty straightforward. We've done with tenses before, so in terms of tenses and the mood, and I'm going to put that here in the center. The terms of tenses, the indicative is very, very straightforward, okay? So tenses. Indicative, just refer to our previous video, which is just essentially your basic divisions of present, past, and future. Of course, all of the subtenses in between, like the imperfect, the perfect, the pluperfect, and the future perfect. But subjunctives are a little different, okay? Because a subjunctive can either be in primary sequence, and that means present or perfect, and secondary sequence, which is either past, so imperfect or pluperfect. Now, why do we break it up into primary and secondary sequences? Well, because the subjunctive, so the tense of the subjunctive, and I'm going to put right here, is dependent on the main indicative verb. So, for example, if I want to say that I should read, okay, when you're dealing with when you're dealing with this particular, that popped up. When you're dealing with that particular tense, you say, well, what is it? It has a present feel, doesn't it? But I could say, today, I should read. There's the adverb telling me what tense this is. Or, I am bored. I should read. Okay? So notice that the tense of the first part, which is the indicative verb, is present, and therefore the sequence, okay, of this should also be present. However, sometimes the subjunctive in English is going to have another auxiliary verb. In this case, I should have read. I'm bored. I should have read. This has a past feel because of this have. However, and I'm just going to type that in so that you know the difference between all of these. This is a present, and it's primary. However, this part, okay, even though your first part, the indicative part, is present, the second part is actually perfect because you are expressing this auxiliary verb have. So, I am bored right now, and I should have read. I came to that realization when? Right now. So this is the tricky part about subjunctives. You really have to pay attention to the context of what is being expressed in a given sentence. So especially when you're reading books, you will see, you may be comfortable with the shoulds and the woulds and the coulds and the mays and the mights. But to really understand and comprehend what is being expressed, you have to identify and know the difference between an indicative mood and a subjunctive mood to be able to determine when uh, either the author or the character in your story came to a realization about something. Okay, so let's turn that around into the secondary sequence, and that is to use the subjunctive mood in the secondary one. Okay, so in the past. So I could say, I was bored. I wanted to show you the difference over here. I was bored. I should have read. Okay. Again, this is a past tense. This is the imperfect. I was born. Therefore, this is going to be in the secondary sequence. It's still perfect, but it's secondary. Okay. Past tense. You could also say, if I had been bored, I would have read. Okay, this is known as a condition. Okay, so here is my past tense. I had been. If you can recognize what tense this is a pluperfect tense. That means this here is going to be in secondary sequence and is going to also be a perfect. Right? And there is my would have. Okay. You could also say, when I was bored, I could have read. Again, we have a past tense, secondary, and it's dependent on my imperfect. So both of these are imperfect. Okay, this is how you can tell the difference of tense in a subjunctive mood. Is there such a thing as a future subjunctive? Yes, but it's dependent on a condition. So for example, if I was going to give you a future condition, if I go to the movies, sorry, if I go to the library, I will read. Okay, and we use this all the time. So if I go to the library, it could be a typical present tense, but it's dependent on the fact that I'm not in the library yet, is it? So the condition is, if I am to go to the library now, or maybe in the future, I will read. And this is known as a primary sequence. Okay, future. And we call this a future more vivid. Okay. Future more vivid meaning that the condition is very likely to be fulfilled. And I'll talk a little bit more about conditional sentences and different types of clauses when we get to clauses. But I just wanted you to be aware of the uses of the subjunctive happen in two categories, and that all of them are dependent on the tense of the main indicative verb, or conversely, if you have an adverb like today that tells you when something is happening, then you will know the tense of the subjunctive. Now, in terms of the imperative tense, there really is no expression of a past or a future command. It is simply a present command. All commands, all imperatives happen now. So telling the tense of an imperative is very, very easy. It's happening now. You can also say that when you're reading a story, you have something like, I told him, read. Okay, then you would see the kind of the colons introducing your imperative read to tell a story about something that you commanded in the past. But really, the tense of the imperative is typically always present. So this is it for mood. Okay, just to recap, we have three types of moods. The indicative, which expresses a truth or a statement. We have a subjunctive, which expresses potential, expressing something that is not true, wishing for something to be true, or providing a condition for something to be true. Okay. Imperatives are always just going to be commands and punctuated by exclamation marks. If you're screaming at somebody, chances are you're using a lot of imperatives. So this is it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this part 3 of the English verb. Next part, we are going to be dealing with actives versus passive verbs and what those things mean. And that'll bring an end to our verb section of the tutorials, and we'll move on to clauses. So I'm very, very happy that you guys are watching this video. Please, once again, if there's anything that's not clear here, if you have any questions, put them down in the comments. I'd be more than happy to explain them to you. But for now, take care, guys, and practice, write diagram sentences as much as you can so that this information is not lost. Take care, and bye-bye.